just to give you kind of a lay of the land for the session. So there's 8 different sessions. Each one of them is a standalone topic, and but there will be, you know, it'll carry throughout the whole 8 weeks as well. And what we're talking about is human energy management, just the same as everything is made of energy. Everything in the universe is made of energy. The chair you're sitting on, the food you eat, the tea I'm drinking, you know, and the thoughts you have, and everything. So everything is about energy, and that's kind of the premise of everything we're talking about. And we'll talk about the human energy aspect of it from the standpoint of that we use our energy to create results in the physical world. And so the 4 ways we measure things in the physical world are matter, energy, space, and time. Those are the 4 things we measure. So that's why we'll focus on those, because we're using the physical world as a you know, what do you call it? Not an analogy, but, you know, to describe what's going on in the world of organizations and people. And you probably, if you saw some of the information I sent, you know that, you know, how I got involved in looking at this is, you know, that I was walking down the campus as an engineer. I studied these physical laws, and we use them all the time, though. When we talk about ourselves, we use them all the time. And the one that is, you know, got me focused on studying this was the topic of stress. First of all, when I was taking a class at University of Illinois, we had a class called Strength of Materials, and it was talking about stress and strain and fatigue and yield and different characteristics of materials and so on. And we literally, a friend and I were literally going to cross Green Street, which at University of Illinois, north of Green, was the engineering campus. And we stopped and we actually said, you know, if we were on the other side of campus, people would think we're psychology students or maybe med students, depending on where we were on campus. The fact we were moving across Green Street to head north of Green, we were, you know, engineering students, and so what we were talking about was stress and physical materials. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized how much the laws are the same, and we will be looking at them in detail. I know you probably use these terms in a general sense, but we'll really look at them, and by doing that, it'll highlight some things about the paradoxes of our lives and the paradoxes of the rules that we follow. The difference between human energy management and like the physical world in general, I would say, is that we have a choice of which laws to use when. So that's the interesting thing about we are ruled by the same laws of nature, you know, in the physical world, and our world of organizations and people, but we do have some choice in when to use the different laws, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So it's kind of fun. So I've already mentioned a couple of things that are physics terms, and I want to see, first of all, if you go to the chat, just because I want you to just get a little practice at this, first of all, is if you go to the chat and just type, you know, some other terms that you know, might know that are, you know, terms that we use that are more in the realm of physics. And if you haven't studied it, I think you probably still know this, but what other words would you say are, you know, words of physics and engineering? What do you think? Gravity, speed, power, velocity. Yes, definitely. So, you know, we need to get up to speed on a project. Who's somebody who has power? That's a very definitely, and velocity is the distance over time. They're physical laws and formulas and everything for these things, and yet we use them all the time in our own world. Anybody have any others? Just try to make sure you know how to do the chat, although I think you've all tried the chat. Is that true? Particles. Acceleration. You got it. Everybody see how to do that? Okay, so I'm going to show you a list of the ones we'll be covering in this class. If I can get my cursor to move. There we go. We're going to cover all these. Force, mass, acceleration, position, distance, time, speed, vector. All these things are taught in engineering school, and I don't want you to get worried about it as if you're not a math and science person. Oh no, you know, this is going to be too technical. It's not. I will show some formulas here and there for people who like formulas, but it really is things that you know because you live it every day. We live on this planet. We are living by these laws of nature, and now it's just understanding in more detail, you know, so that we understand how they affect us. So sometimes they're contradictory. You know, I think one of the benefits that I find is by understanding these laws, you know, we have a fear of the unknown. And if we can relate it, even in some of the times of stress, if you go, oh, that's what's going on, it can be very empowering and empowering. Okay, so that's what we're doing. Now, I'm going to start with, I said that there's 4 things: matter, energy, space, and time. I'm going to start with mass as a first principle that we're going to address, because this has a very fundamental aspect of what we'll be dealing with, which is we're going to create results in the physical world. And in the physical world, the things we see are mass, they're matter, they're, you know, and the way you know you have results really is when you have results in the physical world. And whether we see it, you know, by seeing somebody smile, you know, like that's still results in the physical world, you know, so we know we've achieved a result by something that has happened. And so mass is the first principle we'll talk about. And for a business, for instance, if you think about what mass is, it's matter. So if you think about mass in the physical world, what are some examples of mass in the physical world in a business? I think if you've got some ideas of what that is to understand what mass is. What do you think? Staff? Money, definitely. The organization size. Yeah, the more people, the more mass. And you've heard of the masses, you know, that's mass, exactly. Inventory, absolutely. That is the physical stuff. It can be the chairs and all the furniture that we've got. The buildings, materials, equipment, all those things are the mass that we think of. And so that's the physical mass. Lines of code, yep, that's it. Those are all, you know, things that are physical, tangible, we can touch, we can see. Those are physical things. But there's also a lot of virtual mass in an organization. If you think about what that would be, what kind of things do you think that really affect the, you know, what makes a business a business, you know, that is not necessarily things we see and touch, you know, but they're still very definitely make the heft of a company. What can you think of? Values, yes. Culture, yes. Yeah, and the culture is a really interesting one, is how it's a petri dish and how you add something to the, you know, that's a biological principle, but how you add things to it and add people to it can really change a culture and defining the values. And there's other things to do with anybody have any others they want to add? Just internal processes, you know, organizational structure, you know, and sometimes depending on the type of business, sometimes these kinds traditions, sometimes these can be almost more of the mass of a business, especially with some of the virtual ones that we're, you know, deal with all the time these days. That, you know, Facebook, if you would say that's one that's so much in the news right now, but it's, you know, a lot of it is to do with kind of the reputation would be another one. There's, you know, there's lots of different aspects that make up the mass of a business. And same is true for you, you know, as a person or a family, or, you know, we have the physical and we have the virtual mass. Both are true. And so let's go to the physical world. The term that sometimes people think of when you think of mass is the mass of a person. Now let's talk about the mass of a person is weight, and it's not weight. Weight is different. So it's not like if you think of a big person, a person that has a lot of impact, a person that, you know, has a lot of energy, you don't necessarily think of them in terms of weight, although it can be an aspect of it. But if you think of people that, you know, have a lot of carry a lot of weight in our world, that would be a way to think of it. But somebody who's a big person, who would you think of that is not necessarily a physically big person, but is a big person? The value seems low. Oops. Yeah, CEO, always in a company, a CEO care, you know, they just, you know, they have an impact, and that they're, and if you think about it, go ahead with some other ones. Let me see if you say the sound is low. I don't know how to do that. Let me see if volume is better. I'll speak louder. What's RBG? RBG. Oh, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, of course. Yeah, she's a little tiny thing, isn't she? And she definitely has, you know, a big impact. She carries a lot of weight, like, and then in that sense, weight does make sense. I always think of Mother Teresa too. She's the tiniest little thing, and she was just had so much, you know, impact on the world. So you get the distinction I'm making. It's somebody who is able to achieve a lot with sometimes with very little in the physical world, but they definitely carry a lot. So we will talk about the mass, the board of directors. Yes, they can get more done just by their words themselves can have more impact just because of who they are. So they've got their own mass, and it's by virtue. If we just quickly said, you know, both physically and virtually, the physical part, you know, I'm talking about the body, not the, you know, so it was talked about Henry Ford, that if he was, Oprah's definitely a big person. If Henry Ford lost everything, it wouldn't take him long to recreate it. So this was a story somebody told, because of what he knew. So if you think of the mass of a person, it really has more to do with their knowledge and their position and their, you know, their reputation and all those kinds of things. So that's what we mean so when we talk about mass, and we'll talk about how that can affect the results we create. Another term I want to bring up is about this is inertia, which is kind of a paradox here. We measure mass by inertia, and inertia is the resistance to movement. It's the resistance. And so mass can have, and the reason I bring that up right now is because mass can have a positive aspect and a negative aspect. Is it's hard to move somebody once they're on a path, you know, if they're really you know, really committed to it. So inertia is a resistance to change. So and we will talk about that. So you want to have mass to create with, but also too much mass. And a good example of this was with IBM and Apple. IBM was this big behemoth company, so they couldn't move as quickly, and so they were on a path, and it was like a boat that, you know, a ship that can't change, but a little tugboat can move quickly. That's kind of an aspect of it. So that's an interesting part, you know, we'll address. And energy is the other one, where, and I think probably everybody has heard this relationship of E equal mc squared from Einstein. And that's, again, here's a formula, but, you know, it basically just says energy equal mass times the speed of light squared. What it really usually is thought of as is that you could, if you could get the energy out of mass, it would be a really lot of mass, because the speed of light is a really huge number. So even if you had a little tiny bit of mass, you could get a lot of energy out of it. So that's generally the way we think of that. But a little known fact is that this is how the equation was originally written. And if you're kind of geeky like me with formulas, what that means is mass comes from energy, and it takes a lot of energy to create mass. Think about what that means right now. It takes a lot of energy to create mass. It takes a lot of energy to create results in the physical world. And that is where the physical world results come from, is our energy. And so it's not our time, it's our energy. And so if we put energy into the results we want to create, we really want to become conscious of how we're using our energy and how it's creating the results we're getting. Okay? Any comments or questions? Oops, how come this is, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to use some examples. What we're going to be talking about is applying these principles through all kind of results in the world. And I'm going to give this example because I'm sure everybody can relate to it. And it's when I looked in hindsight, I realized how much these principles apply to this situation. When I was a kid, I wanted this bicycle, a blue Stingray bicycle. And I was from a family of 7. I was the second oldest of 7. And the reality of my parents buying me a bicycle was like, no way, it wasn't going to happen. And so that was the mass that I wanted to create in my life. I wanted this bicycle to be in my life, you know. And so if I wanted to make that happen, it was, you know, I didn't have any rich parents or, I mean, parent or grandparents, rich relatives. So I needed to find some other way. And now usually, you know, you think about, oh, well, you might as well give up. But I'll explain how the principles work here. So if you think right now of some results in the physical world, and you're not committing to this, this is just like, you know, at the moment, we're just kind of saying just blue sky kind of things. If anything could come about, what results would you like to create? Just, I'd like to have, Robert could say a motorcycle, or, you know, like, you know, whatever it is, money in the bank, a relationship, whatever. Can you just, you know, just things, and make it be fun things too. More cash, of course, that's always one. A organic latex wool couch. Cool, that's very specific. I think that's one you should work on. I am organic latex, huh? Everybody thinks 3 or 4. We're going to come back to this, but you get what I'm saying about results in the physical world. Cash is obvious. That couch is obvious. Oh, cool. You have a vineyard with bees? Oh, that's cool. I like that. Yeah, bees. We need more bees. Bees are not. Oh, cool. You're going to create it. All right, we're going to create that. Okay, and Lenora, you should be on a different screen so that you can have your own stuff typed in. Yeah, Bill wants wine from her vineyard. That's good. You guys, you can be off mute. Then we can talk if you want. She says, okay, that's great. Okay, so I'm going to have you be putting more thought into this, but that's what I mean by mass. Is what is the result you want to create in the physical world? What is the mass? And so for me, at the time when I believe, well, I know I was 9 years old, I wanted this bicycle, and it seemed pretty impossible. So, but what I realized in hindsight, a couple of different things. So, whoops, still not working. There we go. Okay. So, some of this you probably have experienced before in other classes or whatever, but we're looking very specifically in the physical world about the basics of space. So we're using our energy to create mass in a space. And one of the first things to consider is our position. And so if I use the example of my bicycle, my position was I was second oldest of 7. I was 9 years old. I had no money, no bicycle, no rich relatives. That was my position. And so the logical thing would be, forget about it. There's no way you're going to be able to get it. But I really like that bicycle. So the next question is, okay, well, what's the distance? You know, how far is that? And if you think about any of the things you just typed in, you have a sense of how far that is. You have a sense of, you know, like, is that something that's just like walking across the room? Or is it, you know, like if you were to make relative distances for different kinds of goals and things, is it, you know, just across the room? Is it, you know, out the door and down the driveway? Is it, you know, in the next street? Is it in the next city? Is it in the next continent? You know, like there, you know, when you think about goals and physical results that you want to create, you do have a sense of how far away they are, and it's a relation of the destination and you know, and the starting point. You know, that we all have a sense of this. So if you think, you know, how long would it take to walk to, you know, the door or your car, or same thing, how long would it take to join an organization versus start an organization? Obviously, the second one takes longer, and that's the same in terms of the kind of goals that we make. So in the case of my bicycle, it was like, which would take longer, my mom and dad buying me a bike, or me going and getting a trip over to China and sourcing it myself and bringing it back and whatever. That's what, that was what it was like. There was no way I was going to be able to do that. But there was another aspect to this. Oops, that was too soon. Oops, sorry. There was another aspect of this, which is that my starting point was a little different than I didn't have any way of doing this. I actually had been a Girl Scout, and it was back in the days where you sold Girl Scout cookies by going door to door, taking orders, and then ordering them, and then when they were delivered, you would go and deliver the Girl Scout cookies. And I was the top Girl Scout cookie salesman in my troop, and it was 90 something. Now they do that probably in a day at the grocery store, but back then that was a big deal. So I had 90, boxes of cookies to deliver. And when I was, focused, I was really focused. I had a lot of energy poured on that bicycle. How am I going to get that bicycle? How am I going to get that bicycle? And I actually looked in the newspaper for jobs. There weren't too many for 9-year-olds, but a neighbor of ours, who was a bit older than me, but he found out about something called a guy named Paul the Eggman. And Paul the Eggman would deliver eggs to their house, and he would then deliver them to customers. And I thought, I can do that. I delivered Girl Scout cookies. So my position, my starting point, was a little closer to that than most people probably would be, because I'd already had that experience. And when I thought about this, I was like, well, my mom and dad would support, my doing that. I was really amazed, actually, that my mom did support me in doing that, because she had to have these eggs sitting in her garage, and then I would eventually go and deliver them. But my experience put me in the position to take advantage of that. So that was kind of interesting. So the last one I want to mention about this is the direction. Sometimes, when you think about what you want to do, you don't know exactly the destination, and I've gone through some of that, and I know some of the others have gone through some of that with like job opportunities, and sometimes you don't know exactly what the destination is, but you do know a direction. And so even when we're starting out defining a destination, an endpoint, we can't maybe say exactly where we're going, but we can say a direction, and that's important too, because if I'm going to head north, I can get moving. I can get moving north. If I don't define a direction, and I think I have to have the destination clearly mapped out first, I won't move. But if I know I'm going to go north, I can get movement, and then I can decide later on exactly where I'm going. So I want to point that out, that when we're looking at getting to creating results in the physical world, the distance is the starting point and the destination, but it also, just having a direction can get you started. So we're going to today focus on some of the destination. And as I said, some of this I know you probably have heard before, but we're doing it in a very physical way, is we're writing our destination. And I'm going to have you do, every week I will have activities for you to do. It's your choice doing them, but you're going to get more out of it if you do. And the reason I say it's your choice is because we're also dealing with the stress of creating change, and it'll be interesting. I don't want you to go, oh, I didn't do my homework, therefore I'm not going to go on the call this week. That's part of the process, and we're going to talk about some of the resistance to change, and again, the inertia in different sessions as well. So this will be one of the exercises, which is to write a destination. And the way of writing it are two ways, and I really get hung up about written destinations because that's mass, and we're going to work with mass and how mass creates force on us. And so having a written destination is critical. And an example I'll give you is people write New Year's resolutions all the time, but what do? They write them, they put them in a drawer, they never look at them again. If you write your destination and you interact with it on a regular basis, it will have a whole different result. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so there's a left and right brain to it, the ideal state and the goals and gleams, and the difference being, the ideal state is really the right brain, the emotional kind of part of it, and the goals and gleams is the more specific, linear, left brain stuff. So when you write an ideal state, it's what you want, but in a very like emotion, right brain kind of way, what you will see, what you'll hear, how you will feel, and in a very emotive kind of way too. It feels good that I've got this. I'm so happy that this is true. And actually, I would make a distinction of it should not be so much the numbers. There needs to be an element of just another example would be like a vision, but a vision in a very positive, emotional kind of way of saying it. And I'll give you some examples of that. And the other part of your destination is the goals and gleams. Let me just make sure I say, yeah. Oh, one other thing is if you have something you don't want, a lot of times it's easier for us to define what we don't want. You need to just write the opposite of that. So what I don't want is, to be struggling, you said before, cash, I don't want to be struggling with money. It feels good to have all the money, to feel wealthy. And, those are the kinds of words you want to use. It feels good to be wealthy. It feels good to be wealthy. And just if you say that, you get that the feelings, wow, if I say that, it makes me feel better. Now, you might go into these thoughts of, oh, well, that's not the way it is. But if you say that again immediately, but it feels good to be wealthy. So it feels good to be wealthy. You say those kinds of things over and over again, it's amazing the impact it can have. So we'll go through some of that. And the left brain part of it is goals. And there is a distinction, a friend of mine named Lee made this distinction, which I just always really liked, is the difference between goals and gleams are goals that you're committing your energy to. So I'm going to have you define some different areas of your life and look at, kind of things that you want to create in different areas. Some you may have goals that you're saying, yes, I want to make this happen. And others are more like, I want it to happen, but I'm not actively pursuing it at this time. But it would be pretty cool if that happened. So the goals need to be in the format of, a couple of different things. It needs to be positive. And what I think is interesting about the word positive is if you look it up in the dictionary, one of the definitions is it's an arbitrarily defined direction. Think about that. An arbitrarily defined direction. Generally, we consider on graphs, positive is to the right and negative is to the left. Positive is up and negative is down. That's how we define it. It's just arbitrary. We could define it the other way. I believe it's the Chinese. No, I'm going to get it wrong. They read from right to left instead of left to right. It's, that's arbitrary too. So positive is an arbitrarily defined direction. So to me, what that means is anybody who agrees with me is positive. Anybody, and you would say anybody who agrees with you is positive, right? And if they don't, they're negative. And we see a lot of that right now with all the politics and everything. So positive is something that, is something that you want to move towards, and really important to write them in that way. The other is that it be present. It is, not it will be. This has to do more with the distance. When you say it is, that's right there. And it will be seems far out. And we want to think in terms of something being we're just going to step over it. Okay? And of course, the passion part of it is you feel inspired and passionate about having it. Kind of that gets a little bit into the ideal state, but just want to make sure that that's covered. So when we set our goals, goals are not they're having a result in the physical world. There's we have a sense of how far away they are, but it really it isn't about a time. It's a distance. Like it may seem like it's far away, but the speed of light is like that. So when we define something, we don't want to think of it as how much time it's going to take. When you're writing these goals and gleams and things, don't focus on this is going to take forever. At the same time, I do want you to create some goals and gleams that have to do with the 8-week period of time, so you can make them kind of stretch goals or not. But anyway, we want to have both. Okay. That was the other thing I was going to say. Gleams don't necessarily have a time frame. Goals, I'm not going to go into a lot of details. I think everybody probably knows about goals. The SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based, although achievable, I think, is action-oriented is another A. But basically, they're very left-brained. I'm going to have this number of this by this time, you know, very, very specific numbers. And I'll show you some examples of this. Okay. And we're going to, you know, really today is really about setting the structure for the rest of the time, but it's also, as I said, it's also kind of a standalone piece, is that what are the areas of life that we deal with? And we'll use pieces of these as we go through the rest of the week. Certain ones will be addressed at different times in the sessions. But if you look at the different areas of your life, you know, the first one is yourself, you know, just, you know, your health. Nothing without health, you know, nothing else works really. So the health is the very primary one. So I really say everybody needs to have a health one in there. And fulfilling work, creative expression. Those are all things that are to do with you by yourself, you know, that you could, you literally could do them by yourself, you know, without anybody else around, but they're things that are very, you know, insular, very to yourself. The primary relationships, I make a distinction, and we'll see this as we go through the different forces in your life, that the primary relationships, of course, are your sexual partner and children and parents and siblings and roommates, and really it's anybody that you are more likely to interact with more frequently, that are a bigger mass, bigger impact in your life. So they carry more weight in your life, okay? And then other relationships are ones that are work, friends, pets, communities. They probably don't have quite as big an impact, although you might put work, some of the ones that you see every day might be primary relationships as well. It's how you define it, okay? Finances, I think that's a category that I don't have to explain. Those are definitely have an area of, you know, we have goals, we have stresses, and so we're going to deal with all those as well. And then work, and I just make a distinction here on time commitments, work or other ongoing time commitments as opposed to the relationships. And then primary environment, what you're in all the time, that's, again, it's impacting you on a daily basis or, you know, constant basis. And then other environments is the social, political, online, and world. I just read something recently that said 62% of people say they are stressed by the social, political, online kind of environments that they're being subjected to. So this, as we talk about dealing with change and dealing with stress, that's one that, you know, probably more than in the past we need to address. And the last one being your spiritual life, kind of your, you know, however you want to call it, whether you call it God or a great spirit or higher consciousness or whatever you want to call it, is kind of the all-encompassing, you know, part of who we are. Okay. And if anybody has questions in any of this, please feel free to ask. Okay, so now I'm going to give you some examples. These are an ideal state. Now notice the first one is, I'm fit, trim, healthy, energetic, and glad to be alive. Would you be inspired to read that every day? I'm fit, trim, healthy, energetic, and glad to be alive. When I read that, because I admit sometimes I don't, but when I do read that, it reminds me, oh, I should go take the dog for a walk, or, oh, I should eat something healthier, or, you know, just by reading it, it has an impact on me. It creates a force on me. And it makes me feel good to think that, oh, you know, that, you know, and so that this is what I mean by an ideal state, is something that makes me feel good to read it. Goals sometimes will make you feel, oh no, I got to get working, you know, but the ideal state aspect of it is it should make you feel good. And if it doesn't, you probably need to tweak it. You know, this is going to be a working document kind of thing. So I think most of you know we moved recently, and we were in a kind of a time crunch to it. And so what I kept focused on is we live in a home that we love that's convenient for our activities. Now again, if I just say that, you know, and I'm going, oh shoot, I got to find a place, you know, and I get all stressed about, you know, having to find a place to live. But when I go back to reading that, it makes me go, ah, yeah, that's what I'm doing. That's where I'm going to put my energy. We're going to live in a home we love that's convenient for our activities. Now, I actually, when we did this, Robert and I, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, we've moved continents, we've moved cities, we've moved a lot. And so at some point, I made a list of, I'm big on writing things down because it's mass and it's going to cause a force back on you. And so we wrote down, this is what we'd like to have in a home. This is what this is what we must have. This is what we'd like to have. This is what we prefer not to have. And this is what we, won't accept. And we had that written down, and we would use that to find homes. And one time in Sydney, Australia, we were looking for a home with a realtor, and we wanted it closer to downtown Sydney and all the stuff. And she said, I showed her my list, and what we wanted to create and the amount of money and everything else. And she said, "You don't understand. There aren't any homes like that in around here." And I said nicely, but I said, "Well, you don't understand because we're creating a house and you're helping us create it." She looked at me like I was nuts. But, she kind of got on board. And the next day, I'm not kidding you, the next day she called and said, "I think I've found the house." And it was where we ended up living, that she found a house that was fit what we were looking for. So it was a little bit more than we had said, but it was enough of what we were looking for that when we were able to write it down, it was for her to also interact with, so that she could be on board and aligned in creating the house we wanted. So when you write about a primary environment, what is it that, really inspires you about where you're living, if that's something that you want to focus on. Now, so those are both clearly ideal states. There's nothing, specific number kind of things. Like I said, I had something else that had numbers in it that were more goal oriented. But having that emotional grab is a real important aspect of creating the forces we want in our lives and creating the results. So this last one is one that I use. These are actually, I've used all of these. And this one was actually many years ago. Working for yourself, there's ups and downs all the time. Contracts end and you've got to create a new contract and whatever. And another time we were going through a time where the contracts were taking some time to show up. And so I wrote I've done this for years. I wrote specifically, so by May 15th is more goal oriented. And I'm showing you this one because it kind of shows how the kind of the goals and the ideal state can kind of mush together, which is fine if that, as long as it's inspiring to you. But at this time I wrote that I have an income stream of at least so much per month established through August by May 15th. And I don't know why I wrote it this way, but I did. And I said, and by September 28th, I have paid speaking engagements lined up for the rest of the year that will earn at least Y per month. And it was more money. So I would read this constantly, and focus on that, because it was really the important thing for me at that point in time was we needed to create an income stream. And, I wanted an income stream, of something per month. So that's the way I wrote it. And I got a call, and I'm not kidding you, in May, I got a call from a friend of mine who was the COO of the Lance Armstrong Foundation. And she had a project, which was a platform, Livestrong Action it's called, that was meant to be released to coincide with the Tour de France, the last Tour de France that Lance rode in. And so they needed a project manager. So she called me out of the blue. She didn't, know anything about, even that. I don't even know if I guess she did know I was looking for work. She did. But she said, "Would you be a project manager?" And it was more than the money I had designated. And I was so focused, you got to watch this. I was so focused on the amount that I actually said, "Well, can I work 3/4 of the time and take less money?" It's like, what am I doing? That's so stupid. But anyway, I did catch myself and not do that. But so that was the Tour de France was through August. And then I still had this other one that I wanted to be making more money. And I got called from somebody else I knew about writing a grant proposal for this multi-million-dollar, it was an energy storage company that I knew, that whatever. Now, it wasn't speaking engagements. but it was for the exact amount that I had designated for September. And I actually asked to leave the Lance Armstrong Foundation. I was done with the project. Can I leave a little early so I can go start this other project? So it was that exact. I'm not kidding you. I mean, I would, any time that I was, you know, feeling worried about money, I'd pick up that paper and I'd read it. Anytime I would, you know, I was just so focused on creating that result. Now, I will tell you this, you know, because for those of you who know me, that you know, I have not been as rigorous about it or as clear about it as I was then. So the more clear you are, the more likely, you know, putting energy into creating that can create the results you want. But you know, that one was so amazing to me that I couldn't even believe that we had that kind of result. So I'm a big believer in this. Okay. Okay. Like I said, this applies on a local level, a, you know, personal level, a business level, or a global level. And for those of you who know me, I very much care about the environment, and sustainability is my passion. And you know, having worked in Go Green Squads, you know, this is a focus. And Buckminster Fuller is somebody that I believe very strongly in what he said and how he said it and different things like that. And one of the things he, one of the, what I just love about something he said was that he had this global vision, and I would consider this an ideal state, kind of a global ideal state, which is to make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time through spontaneous cooperation without ecological offense or the disadvantage of anyone. And that to me is inspiring. And I know that by heart, and I can also repeat that, you know, when I think about, gosh, you know, look at our world and kind of some of the things that we're going through. I wish we would focus. I'm very concerned actually right now about the negative focus that we have in our world, because that energy is going into creating negative results instead of positive results. So if we somehow could get ourselves working on this kind of thing on a regular basis, I think we'd have a lot different results than some of the things we've got going on. So this is an ideal state. You notice that it's a little bit more vague, you know, than specific goals, but it's something that, you know, for me this works. You know, it inspires me. Like, yeah, I can really get behind that. It makes me feel good to read that. And here's a reason. This is more to do with the goals, the goal side of things, which is, this is a graph that's showing the global temperature change since 1850. And I'm showing you this because I do care about the planet and what's going on. This is showing if as it's going around in a circle, it's a year, and it's showing the temperature, and the 1.5 degrees Celsius, that's Celsius, is what we don't want to go above. Now this only stops at 2016. I wish I could find it, you know, updated, but we've gone over 1.5 degrees Celsius. And so this is showing a trend over time, and there are numbers about, you know, specific numbers about what our temperature change, you know, needs to be. There's something called the C40 summit. When the Paris climate change, you know, we pulled out of it, the mayors, the cities got together, and really cities make more difference in the environment. They make a lot of decisions affecting the environment. And so they had what's called the C40 summit. The C40 summit was in Mexico City, and they talked about the trajectory of what each city needs to, you know, from whatever emissions we have to wherever we need to get to, and we need to fill in the dots in between. But one of the things they said is all cities need to reduce from 5 tons of CO2 emissions per capita to 2.9 tons of CO2 by 2030. So that's a goal, and we could identify targets, you know, and there's something I've been working on called eco campaigns, which is exactly about that. So we've got the ideal state. That's important to get us motivated and inspired and on a regular basis to interact with that. And then what we also need, we all work well towards goals that are, I want to get this done in a certain amount of time. Both are important. Both of those things are really important. Okay? Okay. You may have noticed that, you know, I like the scientific Einstein I already referred to before. So I talked about mass and energy, but it just really kind of, this is a kind of in a nutshell about time and space. When you look at something like our planet and our environment and everything, the tendency, and other goals too, the tendency is to be like, there's no way. There's just no way we're going to make it, gloom and doom. And I use this, I use this all the time. I have a book. This is a book. And this quote literally came from this book, which I found in the Sydney used bookstore. It's called The Universe and Dr. Einstein by Lincoln Barnett, The Meaning of Time, Space, and Matter. And the foreword is written by Albert Einstein. I don't know that you can see that, but the foreword is written by Albert Einstein. So I know he agrees with it. And this quote came from there. And this is, in a nutshell, the relativity of time and space. I'm going to focus on the time part of it, because time has no independent existence apart from the order of events by which we measure it. And space has no objective reality. And both of them have to do with, the relativity of time and space. But think about that. Time has no meaning except as a sequence of events, is the shorthand I use. And when I'm thinking there's no way something's going to happen in an amount of time, and just like, okay, what's the sequence of events? What's the sequence of events? What do we need to get done in a certain amount of time? That's what I think about. So when you think that you don't have time for something, that's not true. There isn't enough time. Don't think about time. It's going the distance, not spending the time. It's how do we get something done? So I'll give you another example of doing this where, it was just like, there's no way this could happen, is when Robert's father died. Robert's from Wales, and Wales is a far away. And when you go to Wales, you have to fly to London and then take a 3-hour train ride to Wales. And he was here, and we realized that his visa and his passport had expired. So if he went back, he wasn't going to get back in until who knows, how long it would take him to get back into the country. So we figured there's no way he's going to be able to go for his father's funeral. But then time has no meaning except as a sequence of events. What needs to be done? If you really look at it, look at what if. Well, what if? What needs to be done? Well, we needed to go to Houston for him to fly out, or we needed to go to Houston because that's where the passport office is. And there's also an embassy to go to get the visa taken care of, because there were two different things. So we did a little research. So if we did go to Houston, he could fly out from Houston. So we decided, at the time Ian was probably 2, our son was probably 2, but we realized if we got up about 3 or 4 in the morning and drove, it had to be been 3, because at 6 o'clock in the morning, we needed to be in line at the passport office. And so we drove, and we got to the passport office. There was lines around the outside of it. And then we realized we had to get a passport photo. Luckily, there was a place right across the way, so we put our number in. We went over and got the passport photo and came back. We're still waiting in line until almost noon. And the person before Robert, the guy came over and said, "That's all for today." And Robert's standing there like, oh my gosh. But he spoke up and he said, "Look, I'm going back to Wales because my dad died." And the guy wonderfully said, "Okay, come with me." And he did take pity on him, and he brought him over and he processed the passport. And then we went to the visa, to get the visa. And then literally he was like the running through the airport to get to the airplane on time, and he made it. So there was no way that was going to happen, except when you go, really what needs to happen is not that many things. We just had to get the order right. We had to get the passport and then the visa and then get him on the plane. And so he made it. So this is one that I really, really want you to think about, is when you think things aren't possible, just think about the sequence of events. Okay? Okay. So I am going to have you think about this, and I'll send you an email that has this in there so it's easy for you. But I'm going to ask you to define and look at these areas of your life, and there may, consider all of them, but there may be some that are, more, up for you right now, is to define your ideal state, your goals, and your gleams. And as I showed you, make sure you have an ideal state. Make sure that, you've got the emotional part of it, even if you're not clear on exactly the goals and gleams. But if it's something that's really important right now, make a goal that is very specific, time bound, you know, the way I did with the work. And I realize, you know, as I'm going through this again, that I need to redo mine, you know, and I carry it with me all the time. You know, this is my one-page sheet. I'm going to give you a template for this. It's my one-page sheet that I, you know, carry with me in my journal, and I read it on a regular basis. And it says this or something better. So I will give you that template that you can use. So I want you to go through and identify, you can do it for a longer period of time, but I do want you to identify for an 8-week period of time, what goals and gleams do I have, and what's the ideal state that I want to create for these different areas of life. And then once you've written them, I want you to interact with it often, because that's creating a force back on you. And we're going to talk about that next week, about, you know, the interaction part of it. The most important time to interact with it is when you're not feeling it. When you can't not think something when you're thinking something negative. It's impossible to not think it, but you can replace it with something else. And that's what we want you to do, is to replace whatever that negative thought is with a positive thought. Oh, one thing I was going to tell you about health too. This is a perfect example of how to change, you know, the I'm fit, trim, healthy. I meant to say that. I want to lose weight is not an inspiring ideal state or goal or anything. It's not written positively. It's not, you know, but saying I'm fit, trim, healthy, and glad to be alive, that's a positive way of saying it. So you want to use kind of emotion-based words. I'm more than willing for you to share them with me, and I'll see if I can tweak them to make them more, because I've been doing this for a while, you know, making them more positive if that's something that you want. But really, 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 I want you to make sure to write this in a positive way, okay? And one thing that as you write them, especially when you start writing goals, they now are going to create a force on you, which can cause stress. So that's why dealing with change is the other aspect of this, is we want to create change. We want to identify where we want to go. Now we've got some forces pushing and pulling on us. So, but the goal is not to be like this. Whoops. Now I've got things pulling me in all different directions and I feel like totally overwhelmed. You know, I don't want you to, you know, we'll talk about the, you know, that kind of dynamic. You know, the idea is, what are the different parts of your life, and we'll look at how they align and so on. So we'll deal with stress as we go through it. But first of all, think about what are the different areas and what you want to achieve. And a final thing I'd say is this about, you know, the human energy, that our thoughts have energy, our words have energy, and our actions have energy, and they all have more and more, take more and more, and it's through those that we create our results. So if you focus on what you want, not on what you don't want, if you focus on what you want, you might be amazed at what we can create. And that is the gist of it. Oh, that was just the E equal MC squared again. Make it, oopsie, make it the math. Yeah. Okay, so if you want to take off, if you have questions, that's kind of the content. Oh, I've got 3 whole minutes. If you have questions, take off your mute. Ask me questions, what your thoughts are. Anything? Hopefully I haven't put you guys to sleep. Are you there?
Hey, going off mute. Just one question, Susan. First, this is really interesting. I wasn't quite sure what to expect, and it's really interesting. I like to keep notes, and so I've been just writing in a notepad. Do you send us like a PDF or something of the slides so that we can have those for notes, or should I just continue typing in a notepad with my thoughts?
I don't have, I give you some key points. I don't have the whole slide deck or anything that I give out, but I'll give you some, just kind of the summary.
Okay,
couple of summary
that's perfect. Perfect, yeah. Thanks.
Like these are the topics that we covered. Yeah. Yeah, I've been really back and forth about that. I mean, I actually videoed some before that. I don't know what I should do with that. This is the first series of webinar, the whole idea of webinars, and I'm curious how you feel about the webinar format of it too, because you don't have as much force interacting with people from a screen, as part of the interesting part of it. But, I don't know. Hopefully it's enough.
I do like the group chat, and I think if we use that, especially if we not only interact one-on-one with you, but also look at other people's comments and then interact almost like a forum, I think that makes it more, for me, it's not the same as being in a classroom, but it's enough more interaction that it's more, I get more out of it.
Okay, great. I will use that more. That's good to hear. How about the rest of you? Any comments, questions?
This is Bill. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. Well, I've enjoyed this. Lenore's enjoyed it, and I guess you're going to follow up with an email.
Yes, I will send an email to you.
Okay. Well, we enjoyed being involved and appreciate your this activity. It's fun.
Cool. Well, next week we talk about getting into and staying in motion. It really has a lot more to do with force, mass, and acceleration is basically the concepts. And I think you'll find those interesting as well. Each one we have different topics, and it's all, very, very, grounded in, I literally, I'll walk around and I'll be, like, okay, where's the physical example of what's going on for me? And it really helps. So hopefully it does for you too. And this one is more some things that probably you've thought about a little bit before. We'll get into some things that I'm sure you haven't.
Well, thank you. I guess this is good night then. I
guess it is. Any questions, Satya? You have anything else, or if not, I'm going to do. Actually, I was going to do one more thing. This is, for if you want to watch this, you can, but it's kind of funny. This kid put together this thing about reference frames. I have some videos I'll show in the next one too, but you're welcome to watch this as you leave if you want to. I thought this was kind of cute how she did this. Is it clear?
Exactly what number is this? She says it's 6. She says it's 9.
Bye.
Who's right?
Bye.
Actually, they're both right. They just saw it differently since they looked at it from different reference frames. Now, what exactly are reference frames? These are just a set of axes for locating space and a clock for measuring time, relative to which you make observations. I'll demonstrate. Once this car starts honking, all 3 observers will record its sound. But sound is a wave. Waves from a moving source, like the car, get bunched up in front and looser at the back. So for our case, those behind the car should hear the loose sound waves, a low pitch, while those in front should hear a high pitch sound. When I analyzed the recordings, that was exactly what I found. So what sound was the car really making? A high pitch sound, a medium pitch sound, or a low pitch sound? Well, it was really making all 3 pitches at the same time, each pitch relative to 1 observer. Then what if we had infinitely many observers? Then the car would be making infinitely many sounds, each sound relative to 1 observer. And even if they all disagreed, no one observer is wrong. What each observes is what the sound is. Similarly, if I throw this ball close to the speed of light, its light waves would also get loosened and bunched up, making it appear as different colors. With infinitely many observers, the ball would appear to be all colors at the same time, each color relative to 1 observer. So sound and light are relative. Ever heard of time being relative? Consider a light clock with 2 mirrors and a photon bouncing between them. Every time the photon hits the bottom mirror, it's 1 tick of time. So when I start moving, I see it travel in vertical lines. But from your stationary frame, it travels really in beats.
Cool about your
so since the photon has to travel a longer distance and the speed of light is constant, each tick is longer relative to you. So moving clocks run slower, and the faster you run, the slower your clock ticks. So in Olympic races, Usain Bolt is actually the best time traveler. If he ran at 96.8% the speed of light and took 10 seconds to finish a race according to his clock, a stationary judge would record 40 seconds, to which he would obviously object. But their argument would be pointless since time is relative. So the really mind-blowing idea here is that observers in different frames will perceive different versions of the same reality. and every observer's frame is equally valid. So before you start making any observational arguments with others, first imagine yourself observing through their reference frames.
That was actually great.
Wasn't it? I love it. Anyway, okay.